With Washington Commanders training camp underway, who is overperforming, who is underperforming, what are some of the biggest position battles to watch, and much more. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Raise Hail Report. I'm your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by the co host of Believe in Commanders, Scott Jackson. Scott, it's great to have you on.
Hey, great to be with you, Matthew. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Excellent, excellent. Excited that we finally have training camp. Excited
Mhm.
for, believe it or not, I mean, we're just a few weeks away from the first, preseason game. Actually, 2 weeks away from the first Commanders preseason game. It's
Mhm.
on a Friday. I'm one of the weirdos who likes to watch the preseason and I get
Mhm.
excited for it, and then of course
Mhm.
spend all my time after the game with Fred Smoot on the radio network talking
Yeah.
about it. So we're looking forward to it. Although I'm sure we'll probably see very little from the ones in week one at least.
And I believe that yesterday was the last Thursday without football until
Yeah.
February, so we have a lot of football to, look forward to going forward. But, getting right into it, wide receiver Ja'Cory Brooks, he was undrafted free agent out of Louisville. He's really been turning heads so far in, training camp. You obviously have the absence of Terry McLaurin, and Brooks has really been able to step up in that wide receiver room. He's hauled in at least one touchdown in both days so far. I'm not sure about what he did today. But as a UDFA, what do you see his role looking like in 2025?
Well, he's a roster hopeful. I mean, if he's going to make the team, it's not going to be because he catches touchdowns in practice. It's going to be because he can cover punts, he can cover kickoffs,
Mhm,
or return. Which, although I think Jalen Lane will handle that. But
mhm,
yeah, I mean, guys like that, like you're talking about, roster hopeful guys. I mean, they're going to have to they're going to show out on special teams to make the team. I think you know who your core receivers are. Terry's going to show up sooner or later, and obviously Debo and Noah Brown and Jalen Lane's going to be part of that. Luke McCaffrey's going to be part of that as well. Maybe Michael Gallup makes the team, although I think he still has to prove something too. They can stay
mhm,
healthy throughout camp, and obviously,
yep,
they don't even put pads on yet. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the mini camp stuff, the training camp stuff, it really doesn't matter until they put the pads on. I think they'll put a lot of
mhm,
evaluation into what they're going to see against those practices against the Patriots, certainly against the Ravens. That's really where guys will separate at
mhm,
that point. And look, with injuries, it's good that a guy who's maybe the seventh or eighth guy at this point or whatever he would be. I haven't really done the math on it. Would be showing out because you never know, right? Like you never know if you might need him. I mean, maybe practice squad, for him is probably the most realistic outcome. You kind of
mhm,
look at the math of all this thing about the guys that are under
mhm.
contract and the guys that they drafted.
And then, after seeing how good he's performed so far, how much pressure does Brooks put on a guy like Luke McCaffrey, who maybe had a slightly underwhelming rookie season in terms of just, I'm another young wide receiver who's kind of coming for that role?
Yeah, I don't think Luke McCaffrey feels pressure from this. I think
Mhm,
Luke McCaffrey's probably focused on what he wants to do. He wants to be on the field more. He wants to get more opportunities. You saw last year when he was
mhm,
throwing the football, he usually did some good things for them. I don't think Luke McCaffrey's got to worry about anything, nor Jalen Lane. Those kind of guys that were, draft picks, and Luke that played and returned and showed that he has a kind of an idea of what he might look like in the NFL. But yeah, I mean, again, like I'll reiterate, it's swell that he's doing all this stuff when guys got
mhm,
helmets and shells on. But let's see when the pads get on. Can he get off the
yeah,
line of scrimmage? When another
mhm,
team's playing him, we don't even know what the drills were where he's catching touchdowns. I mean, I have who are they against? The three sports? We have no clue. So
mhm,
I wouldn't get too jacked up about these things about as we call them Ashburn All Americans until we actually see them in some of these games and they
mhm.
get to shine.
And then I know Deebo obviously got that over the shoulder touchdown on the first play on the first day, but then I also saw that was over Tyler Owens. And I'm a big Tyler Owens fan, but at the
Yep.
same time, you're talking about a third string defensive back, so you can't overreact too much during training camp. And then, Terry McLaurin obviously holding out for that new extension. I know you had an episode recently on Believe in Commanders where you talked about it with Anthony Armstrong. Where are you at with this holdout? When's it time to panic that this deal has not gotten done yet?
Yeah, I think if you get like midway through training camp to the third, getting into like say the third preseason game, and we haven't
Mhm,
seen him, then I'd be concerned because it's
mhm,
not that he can't come in and be productive, but you're always kind of put yourself at risk for one of those. soft tissue injury, some type of pull or what have you, and then is not really in the same type of shape he would be in if he was out there putting the pads on every day and working out with the guys. It's football shape. It's different when you're working out with your trainer. So yeah, that would be the concern, and it obviously just hurts the overall depth of the team. I mean, look, we've seen Jaden Daniels; he does a great job distributing the football to a lot of different players. But part of the reason he could do that was because he had a guy like Terry McLaurin who drew so much attention, and certainly they're going to do some really interesting things, I think, this year with Debo. And Debo's a pro. I don't care what he does in training camp. I come in great shape. He's on a contract year himself. So I was never concerned about some of these silly reports about Debo. I mean, I've seen a million of these workout videos. I guess it's his trainer pumps out or what have you. So he's putting the work in. I knew he'd be ready for training camp and for the season. So you just hope he can stay on the field, because when he is on the field, he's such an important piece, and the defenses have to know where he is. And he could really, in Cliff Kingsbury's offense, do a lot of great things. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Terry, I'd say if we're talking about this going into week preseason game number 3, then that's a problem.
100%. If you're tuning in, make sure you like and subscribe. Completely free, helps out the channel a ton. And there's been a lot of good news surrounding 7th round pick Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt. I've really liked what I've seen from him, not just in training camp, but also at New Mexico in college. And he's just a very explosive guy. You look at a very crowded Washington running back room, but Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr.'s contracts both expire after this season. Could we potentially see Croskey-Merritt emerge as the starter by the end of the year? If not by the end of the year, what does that timetable kind of look like for his role?
That'd be great if he could, obviously, because it's like found money when you pick a guy that late and it becomes a starter. We saw that not too many years back. Well, actually 13 now with Alfred Morris. But Alfred, it was obvious from the beginning, if people went to training camp, he was going to be the one. I mean, because he kept getting up in the rotation. We'll kind of watch that as camp goes on. Croskey-Merritt, same thing with him as we said about this. About the others. Let's see how he plays special teams. Let's see how he picks up the blitz, right? Can he block? Can he protect Jaden Daniels? He's the guy out there on third down. Can he do those things? I mean, we know he can run with the football, and he's explosive. We saw that in college. I think those things will translate in the NFL. They were very excited about him in mini camps and the OTA. So I think that's a good sign. But again, we'll see. I mean, Brian Robinson is going to be the best offensive line you would hope to think he's ever been behind, with the addition of Tunsil and however the right tackle is going to figure out whether it's Josh Connerly in year 1, or if they keep Wiley out there, the retooled interior, and once they get Cosme back, that will be huge, obviously. So I think you look at that, and you've got to be excited for him and for Eckler. You know what Eckler can do? He was a fix you on third down kind of guy. Sometimes throw under the chains, and he'd make people miss and get you first down. So I think that those two guys are still there. I think it's going to be tough to get Jeremy McNichols off this roster. He does so many things well for them. And I go back again to special teams. I mean, I think Croskey-Merritt's fighting, he's fighting Rodriguez for that spot. I think if you keep 4, I think that's where you're looking at with him. I don't think it impacts, Robinson nor Eckler. I think those guys aren't going anywhere. It's really the bat, how many do you keep? Do you keep 3? Do you keep 4? That's what becomes interesting. And, maybe you like him, but you also think you can slide him into the practice squad and, yo-yo him at some point during the season too. So there's always those games they play with the roster.
And I wanted to get into the offensive line, which you just touched on a little bit. Dan Quinn was asked if Sam Cosme will be ready to play in week 1. He stated it's on the table for sure. Obviously Cosme tore his ACL this past January in the NFC divisional round against the Lions. What would that mean for this offensive line, having him back by the start of the season? Or do you like to see them really just not rush it? I know he's done a little bit at training camp, but still take it slow, maybe come back, week 5 to 8 when he's feeling a little better. You don't want to re-aggravate that injury.
Well, I'm surprised to hear that he could play week 1, frankly. I just thought a bigger guy. I didn't really know the expectation. And remember, Kingsbury, he asks a lot of his offensive line. He needs you to get out in space sometimes. So that's interesting, but that's great. I mean, if that's what they think, I think they have good medical people. I think they've really invested in that clearly since Josh Harris started owning this team. So we'll see. I mean, I don't think they're going to do anything stupid. I think we saw last year they were careful with injured guys throughout the season. They didn't take any unneeded chances. So I'll trust their staff on that. I mean, we don't know. We're not there. We have no idea. I don't have a
Mhm.
medical degree, but it is surprising and encouraging that he is moving along that quickly, though, I would say, because I did not expect that. I figured a bare minimum he would be out, the first month of the season.
And then you also mentioned earlier that Andrew Wiley has been taking snaps with the starters at right tackle instead of their first round pick, Josh Connerly. Now, I think we kind of expected this going into training camp because Dan Quinn also made Jaden Daniels compete for that starting quarterback role last season against Marcus Mariota. When can we expect to see Connerly beat out Wiley for that role? Will it happen this season? Do you think Quinn would rather maybe have Connerly play behind the veteran in year one?
I think he wants to play where the best people are, and if that means rotating, and we saw some of that in the past too, at the
Mhm.
position, I think they could do that as well. Wiley's been around. He's played inside, he's played outside, as a guard and as a tackle. With his time in Kansas City, I think at times he's been fine, and I think sometimes people are a little bit hypersensitive to every mistake he makes.
Mhm.
You're going to make mistakes out there. It'd be great to have the first round pick though in the field as soon as they feel like they can trust him. That'd be a great sign to see right away. But I think you got to get your best 5 guys, whatever that looks like, out on the field. If that means, that it's the rookie in year one, if it's not him, right away, so be it. Just get your best 5 people. You got to make sure you're taking care of number 5, and giving him as much time and much
Mhm.
protection as possible.
Absolutely. And then one of Washington's weaker positions in my mind is safety. They did add Will Harris in free agency, but they also lost Jeremy Chin to the Raiders. Does this position concern you at all going forward, just when you consider the lack of star power and the lack of depth that they have in or at the safety position?
Well, I think the secondary, there's a lot of things that are interesting. I think
Mhm.
actually corner starts with whether or not Marshawn Lattimore looks like the
Yeah.
guy that they traded for, who was a all pro like 3 years ago at this point, now maybe going up 4. I think that's where it really starts for me. Yeah, the safety Quan Martin played well in stretches. Obviously, his second to last game was tremendous
Mhm.
in Detroit. I think Piercy Butler just got an extension. I think
Yeah.
he's shown he's been good in spots for them as well. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Jeremy Chin, they didn't think his year was as great as obviously
Mhm.
maybe some of the fan base did, because they didn't really go hard to keep him.
Mhm.
And he ends up going to the Raiders on a pretty good deal, for him. So we'll see. Will Harris, is he is it about a wash in that deal, or do they come out ahead on it? I don't know. It's hard to say at this point without seeing
Mhm.
him in pads and in real game situations yet. But yeah, it's certainly an area to keep an eye on. The back seven, to keep an eye on, is certainly is going to be a key to this season, as well as can they actually stop the run, which they did not do very often last year.
And then this is also a very old team. The Commanders are the oldest team in the NFL. I know they had an average age of 25 or 27.52. I believe that was before they added Von Miller, who's obviously 36. When it comes to their age, is that something you could see potentially holding them back? Does that give them an advantage with that veteran leadership in the postseason? How do you kind of view this age? Maybe it's a little bit of a mix of both.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is like, are the guys behind them coming along? Is Jordan McGee coming along
Mhm.
behind,
Mhm.
in the linebacker position? Like, that's important, right? If one of those young guys is coming along, then you feel better about the age there. Tight end, same thing. Is Ben Sinnott coming along behind Ertz?
Mhm.
Then you feel better about it. Are one of these young pass rushers developing behind Von Miller? Is John Baptiste? Is he actually developing this season, or one of those youngins, right? So that's what you look at. So I think the age is skewed a bit. You got a few, like there's like 4 guys that are kind of
Mhm.
higher in age, right? That kind of changes it all. But Bobby Wagner was an All-Pro last year. Zach Ertz was awesome last year. Now you
Yeah.
can say, well, it's just around the corner when it's going to go the other direction. I think Dan Quinn has shown, since he's been here, from all we hear, and Ertz is on a podcast about this a few weeks ago, takes care of his veteran players really well. Make sure that they're in the top, shape when they get ready for the season and for each week. He takes care of them during the week. So I think that part of it, you got to trust this staff in. And I think the staff, showed that they're pretty smart with the way they handled, some of those things last year. And it makes sense they're old, honestly, because they've done a lot of 1 years, right? They've done a lot of
Mhm.
short-term contracts. They had, cleared out basically most of the Rivera drafts. with the exception of a few players. They have, some guys that are still hanging on from those years that are productive still. And then, it's your two draft classes, last year's draft class with Jaden and Sainrisville, headlining it. And now it's going to be this year's draft class, what they get out of that. So that doesn't worry me as much. And, again, as long as you are still having productive older players, it's different if they're older players that stay hurt and they're sucking up cap space. That's the other thing. These guys aren't making outrageous money. I mean, they haven't really gotten themselves in trouble with contracts at all at this point. So I think that's the other thing we got to keep in mind. We talk about, well, they got this age. Yeah, it's not like they've got this age that they've invested, 3-year, 4-year deals to either.
And you mentioned this, but I feel like there's still a lot of young talent on this team where they're kind of running a two timeline here, where they're hopefully going to be contending this year or next year. And then you look at the secondary, that's very young. You look at some offensive pieces along with Jaden Daniels, that's a very young offense. So I do think that there are a lot of pieces that can hopefully step up when the older guys, do move on. And then the last question I have before we wrap things up, there's very high expectations for this team. You have Daniels going into year 2. They made the NFC Championship game last year. What would they have to accomplish this year for you to consider the season a success?
I think you want them back in the playoffs.
Mhm.
I think the NFC Championship thing last year, I mean, they hit it at the right time. They got the Lions at the right time. The Lions were missing a
Mhm.
lot of pieces on that defense, right? I think it
Yeah.
was, Tampa. They had a couple fortunate breaks in that football
Mhm.
game.
Mhm.
Look, their quarterback was a fixer of a lot of things. I
Mhm.
don't think they can expect to play. They've got to get a lot better at defense than they were. They
Yeah.
disguised a lot of stuff last year. They were fortunate. They played some bad quarterbacks as well. That right now, if the schedule's, everybody's healthy going into each
Mhm.
week, is going to be much more challenging, I think. And the surprise thing. I mean, by the midseason, everybody knew who they were. I don't think you could have been saying like, well, Philadelphia was by surprise by them when they came
Mhm.
into FedEx. No, they weren't. They got beat and they got their quarterback knocked out of the game. So
Yeah.
I don't buy that. I mean, once you're in the playoffs, nobody should be surprised while you're there. They didn't surprise the Lions. The Lions just couldn't stop a nosebleed that day. So I think it's going to be, for me, get back in the playoffs. I think is important. I think there is a formula where this team will actually be better in a lot of ways, but not win 12 games. I mean, I think it'll
Mhm.
be very challenging. I'd be stunned if they won 12 games. Frankly, I think 10, 11 would be great, but with this schedule, it's very challenging. I just want to know that when they're playing, if they're in the postseason going into January, are they playing their best football? Are they stopping the run? Are they not one of these teams that you can just gash running the football?
Mhm.
And are they getting to the quarterback? And last year I think too, uh, creating turnovers was that's kind of been a staple of Dan Quinn. In his time in Dallas and with Seattle, creating turnovers, and they didn't. Outside of bunches in the Seattle game, or excuse me, in the Detroit game, they didn't do that on a regular basis. So I think that's the other thing you want to see, a little bit more consistency there with the ability to take the ball away, and obviously part of that starts with getting pressure on the quarterback. So those are the things I look at. And again, is Jaden Daniels healthy the full year? Is he showing growth?
Mhm.
Not taking a big step back? Like that's important. Like that kind of stuff is important. Still think Philly's better on paper. I think Detroit's way better on paper as well. If they're all parts equal, even though Washington beat them last year. I just think there's a pecking order to this thing that you got to be honest about. I think Tampa, would be interesting if they matched up again. I think the Rams are
Mhm.
really good, have the
Yeah.
potential to be really good as well. In that division. So there's still some tough teams. And again, you're playing the AFC West, which is excellent. With your cross conference deals this year, that's not going to help your schedule. You're on the road for some really challenging games. So how do they come out of all that? Like I said, it may not be as a 12-win team, not 12-5, but if they are like 10-7 with some quality wins and then building towards the end of the year, I think you could be happy with that. And if they go in the playoffs and again make a run, I think people would be excited about that type of season.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat here. I kind of just want to see reassurance that this team is relevant. I think they
Yep.
improved from where they were at last season with the additions that they made over the offseason, but I don't know, as you mentioned, if that's going to translate into winning more games.
Right.
But with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
Appreciate all the support. Jackson Sports on the X. You can follow me there. Real Jackson Sports on Instagram. Priority Auto Sports Radio. That's the banner behind me. 94.1 daily, 3 to 7, Monday through Friday, I should say. We have an app. You can check us out there. And of course, after all the Commanders games, the Commanders Post Game Radio Network with Fred Smoot, also on at halftime with that broadcast. So, and yes, you mentioned it coming in, Believe in Commanders podcast with Anthony Armstrong. He and I do, we'll start picking it up. We're doing about once, twice a week now in the off season. Once we get towards the season, it'll be more like 2 to 3 podcasts a week.
Absolutely. Go check out everything Scott does. If you made it up to this point, can't thank you enough for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Helps out the channel a ton and is completely free. Again, Matthew Heisman alongside Scott Jackson on the Ray Tail Report. As always, we will see you next time.